Hello and a big warm welcome to you. My name's Marion Rose.
And I'm Lael Stone.
Today we're talking about family conditioning. Lael,
Yes.
are you on your phone?
I was on my phone because I'm about to read. I'm about to read to you why we're talking about this. No, I'm just bored with you, so I'm going to just
I just
scroll Instagram.
Sorry to be taking you away from scrolling Instagram.
Oh dear. Well, hello everybody. Today, family conditioning. I was just reading. We got somebody wrote into us just asking if we could explore this a little more. When we both thought this is a great topic to lean into. So this question was really about this woman's partner who grew up with a bit of a challenging childhood and finds that when they go back to visit that family of origin, that her partner doesn't often stand up for himself, and his mother and sister will, treat him badly, treat him like he's still a little boy, and there isn't much respect there, and it's very challenging for her to witness her partner do this when he goes back to the family. And how do you navigate this? How do you navigate that, what we're calling family conditioning, when you have been one way in your family as a child, and then perhaps you grow up and you leave and then you come back, but you're placed in that same box again, or you are treated in similar ways to the role that you played when you were younger. Now, I think this happens in many families. And I think this is such a good topic to explore, because what can we do with that? I mean, that's really what we want to look at. It's very understandable how we move back into those spaces, but what can we do to change that patterning and that conditioning, and how we turn up in that space so we no longer feel either that way, or that we can change the dynamic in our family. So it's a good, juicy topic to lean into.
It is, isn't it? And I was thinking something kind of similar and related that can be really kind of helpful information as well, if we're going back to our family of origin with our children, and then we're seeing perhaps our parents maybe interacting with our children in ways that really make sense of perhaps the things that we've been working with psychologically, of like, oh, no, okay, so they probably did that to me or responded to me like that when I did that, and that makes so much sense of why I'm now X, Y, and Z, or working with something. So there's something powerful, isn't there, about seeing the impact of these ways that we are responded to, and how much we can be drawn back into them, and how painful that can be at times, to be like, oh, ouch. And sometimes thinking that maybe, oh, I've done that inner work, and that doesn't happen for me anymore. And then to find like, pachong, we're right back there again.
There's that saying, if you think excuse my swearing, if you think you've got your shit together, just go live with your family for a week, and then you'll be like, oh, there's an edge. There's another edge.
Wasn't that Ram Dass, I think?
Oh yeah, I'm not sure, but I love that, because it's really true, isn't it? And I think that's why people often move to other countries or move really far away from their family, so they're not put in those places, because it feels painful, or those wounds are there. So it can be so big. And one of the things that often clients I work with will say, when we talk about our childhoods, they'll often say, I can't remember any of my childhood. I can't remember how my parents responded to me. And yet then they'll hang out with them, with their children, as you're saying, and they'll watch their parents respond to the grandchildren, probably in similar ways that they were responded to, and they'll be like, oh, that's probably what happened, because they're shutting down the tears, or they're trying to distract them, or they're telling them, don't be so upset, or there's a whole lot of different words and things that they're saying that's very familiar to us somewhere, because we're like, oh yeah, that's what happened to me when I was younger.
Funny you saying about people moving very far away. I did that, and one thing I found was it's really helpful in terms of doing things completely differently. It's completely free. It's like starting with a fresh slate, without anybody. Did everything really differently, from pregnancy to birth to everything, and it was really helpful to not have anybody around who was trying to persuade me not to do that.
Yes.
So, I mean, there are obviously disadvantages of not having that long-term support and community, but there was definitely many advantages of actually just being so unencumbered by all that conditioning, because I was living in a completely different country, and without the people that had I had been in ways with in younger years that would have made
Mm.
it much harder for me to do that.
Which it then makes me think about people who are trying to change these stories and imprints and patterns in their own family of origin with a lot of contact. How tricky it is. How tricky it is when you are like, you know what, I want to do it a different way. Yet you're seeing your family, you know, 3 or 4 times a week, or, you know, you're with your siblings, or because it's so much more in your face, isn't it? So, you know, I think that's really important to remember. Wow, it is really hard when we're wanting to do it differently, when we are still surrounded by those people who are like, no, no, this is the way you should do it, or this is the box we've placed you in. It's very hard to often find who we are. And I think, you know, it takes me back to why the teenage years are so important, and that young adulthood is really important, because it is such a time of finding who you are outside of that family unit. And it's often very important for teenagers or young adults to go overseas or go somewhere else, or, you know, find out what is my identity outside of you. And that can feel very challenging for parents when they feel their children pull away a little bit. They're like, no, 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 that doesn't feel safe. You've got to come back. You're one of us. You've got to belong to our tribe here. This is how we do it. And that can be a real push pull for a lot of people as well. But it's so important that we step outside of that to be able to go, well, who am I outside of this family circle here? Because it's very important that I get to feel and be who I need to be, especially if we grew up in a family where we weren't allowed to be who we felt we needed to be, you know, especially if we had to be good all the time, especially if we had to you know, work hard to get our parents' approval, especially if we had a role that we took on in the family of looking after the younger siblings, you know, or looking after a parent, or anything that was a heavy responsibility that perhaps wasn't ours to carry, but we had to because that was the role in the family we got handed. And it was too challenging to say no, or we didn't have the words to say no, or we didn't know how to, and therefore that's what we've taken on. And you know, you probably see this so much as well, Marion, with many of the people I work with, that is still playing out now. You know, the roles that we take on when we were younger, whether that is that you are the person that fixes everything in the family, or whether you're the one that has to make it all right, or whether you're the scapegoat in the family, or whether you're responsible for your brothers and sisters, and or whatever the role is that you had to take on board. Often we can play it out, and sometimes so unconsciously we don't even realize that we're still doing it.
Absolutely. And the other thing I was thinking, going back to what we were just saying, that if you're around your family and you are becoming a parent, there's something that can be really tricky in that, because your parents might still be responding to you more as a child and seeing that they are the parents and they tell you what to do. And that tricky transition, if you're coming into being a parent with your parents around who are wanting to maybe for you to parent in the ways that they parented, that's a really big thing to be then like stretching into this new role as parent, as and often people often only start connecting with that when they're becoming parents. Oh, what do I believe, and what, you know, how, you know, things like, where do I want my baby to sleep, and what kind of birthing do I want to go for, and, you know, all the kinds of questions that we think about. How challenging that is if we're constantly being invited to be kind of squished back into the conditioning that we received, when actually we're wanting to really, you know, it's almost like the next level of the spiral, isn't it, from what you're talking around the adolescence and then the young adulthood, is what do you fundamentally believe about human beings and what they need to thrive. And it's such a core question that we come to in parenting. And I think at these times we really need that love and support, and that yes, what do you really want, and how would you like to be with your baby, and you know, how would you like to respond, and, you know, all the questions we have around, you know, do you want to have a cot, or do you want to have them sleep with you, and do you want to
breastfeed
put them in a breastfeed
or
or bottle feed? Do you want to put them in a pram or a stroller or a pushchair or whatever you call it in your country, or do you want to carry them on your body? Like all of these questions that are so they're really big questions to be asking ourselves. And I really think that's the time where we really need lots of space and support to go, yeah, what feel into that? What would you really like? And if you look around, what would you really love? And I think so often newer parents are not getting that support to really listen to themselves. Again, there's so much, not only family conditioning, but cultural conditioning and advertising. And you know, I even remember when I was pregnant with Lana, that's 21 years ago now, and we were like, do we want to get a, in Australia call them strollers, do we want a stroller, or do we just kind of do this, baby carrying thing? And we went to the shop, and literally it was like 50 different types of strollers, and they were all black. And I was like, why are they all black? This is so horrible for a baby. I don't want my baby in one. And I'm not even going to buy one anyway. And just these kinds of, the bigger conditioning that happens around, this is how you are with a baby, that we're getting all around the place, not just from our family. So it's a really big time where I think parents need so much support. And I think that's what we're here to really support you listeners, to go, well, what would you like to do? What resonates for you? What did you not enjoy receiving when you were growing up? What don't you like? And really listening into what resonates for you as a parent, not your parents or your sister or your your neighbor down the road, but for you, what really resonates in your heart about this.
Yes, it's so big, isn't it? Because when we sometimes have dynamics in families where we're really enmeshed, which means, it's not just you, it's all about exactly what your sister thinks and what the mum thinks. And it just, it's all kind of intertwined. It can be so hard to stand in your center and go, where am I in this? And who do I want to be? And it takes work and it takes practice, and it can feel very dangerous standing up and saying, actually, I want it to be like this. And the reason why it can feel so dangerous sometimes is because when we're young, we take on board these stories and we go, well, this is how it is, and this is who I need to be in order to survive, because we're hardwired for attachment. That's survival. And so we learn pretty early on, I must be good in order to get my needs met here. And so we often abandon who we are or what we want to be or what we really want to say, because most of us are brought up in a world where we have to be good. And so it can feel so challenging as an adult to actually speak what we need to speak or claim the space we want to take, because often, and this is so much of the work we do, often when those inner child parts of us haven't actually been listened to or integrated or heard or loved in the way they've needed to, when we try and stand up and say what we need to, the fear of that little child comes popping up. And that's why it can feel so terrifying to actually say, you know what, Mum, I don't want to do it that way. Or, you know what, Dad, I don't actually like the way that you're speaking to me. It can feel so terrifying because it's usually the child parts of us that have popped up, and that's what's feeling the fear. And that's so much of the work we often talk about, of what do we need to do to heal those younger parts of us to be able to stand and say, actually, this is who I am and this is the space I want to claim, and it's okay if you don't like it, because I am choosing me and this is my life and my journey. But it can feel so big, so big. And I absolutely have so much empathy and compassion for people, because you can work with someone and go, okay, let's look at it, and what words do you think you could say? And then the minute you walk in the door of your family home, it's just like, yep, I'm back being this one again, right? And you're back being the one that everyone blames, or you're back being the one that tries to make everyone laugh, or you're back being the one that's got to help everybody. We so often take on those roles because they're often so unconscious, we don't even realize we're doing them.
And it fits with what we were talking about last week about the balance of attention and understanding, that when we get into a situation that was similar to what we've experienced in the past, that's what our psyche does. We go back to those same feelings, that same age in our body. So we might suddenly feel small because we're actually going back into those younger places in us. And, we're really designed to be like that. And it is a really big thing to gradually and increasingly be relating to our parents or our family of origin from our adult self, and not from a younger parts, from actually our own parent self, that actually is like, no, I get to choose. I'm the parent now. You had your opportunity. And to really stand in that authority. I know I've seen many people who've really wanted to, whatever it is, whether it's home birth or homeschool or whatever, and the challenges they've had because of those younger parts and all the feelings that show up when their parents are just basically saying, well, no, we didn't, you shouldn't do this, or you can't do this, or this is not right, or and so often as well, parents or grandparents can also then go into all their own feelings. They can think that perhaps we are judging them, or that we are blaming them, or it can be really painful. And I often remember as a younger mum, I used to think, well, what would happen if my kids do something completely different some completely different type of parenting, and how painful that might be, and how powerless I might feel, and how I might really want compassion and empathy for the doing it differently. So I think there's something about that. And we have talked about this in a different podcast. Which one was that called? I've forgotten.
I can't remember.
Something to do with family, where we really talked about that element as well. But
and you know, it also makes me think about and I talked a little bit about this on the podcast I did with my mum when we were talking about archetypes, and I think we were talking about she often talks about the different levels of consciousness, and she would talk about that often when we're in a tribal mentality, we're all about keeping everybody else happy, and we're worried about what everyone thinks, and we often have a bit of a victim consciousness. If it's not fair, things keep happening to me, and we kind of stay stuck in this place of we're doing what the tribe approves of, and then something will happen in our life. We have some form of crisis or awakening, so we might get sick, or we lose our job, or we become a parent, or something big happens, and we go, actually there's got to be more to this. And then we move into what she calls an individuation level of consciousness, which is where we're like going, wow, actually, do I believe that anymore? And is that who I want to be? Yet when we're in that state, it's often very lonely, and people can refer to that as the dark night of the soul, when you're in that place of like really questioning, well, who am I and who do I want to be? And I love that my mum used to explain it to me this way. And she said, and what often happens is when you move into that individuation state, the tribe looks at you and goes, what are you doing? Don't go over there. Come back here. And so they often will try and pull you back in to that tribal mentality, because when you are actually starting to question, you know what, well, this is perhaps who I am, and this is who I want to be, and we start taking actions to claim ourselves, it can often be a mirror back to those others who aren't, that says, actually, I'm choosing me. Now, we live in Australia that has a very strong culture of this, is that when we see someone successful or doing something wonderful, we like to pull them down. We call it the tall poppy syndrome here, because often it's a threat. It's this whole, well, you can't be successful because that makes me reflect on that I'm not successful, and then that makes me feel bad. So if you're not successful, then I don't have to feel bad. And so often in that tribal mentality, what can happen is that as we shift and change, we get criticism from the tribe. We might get criticism from our family or our friends, and what are you doing, and why are you behaving like that, and why are you into that now, or and they kind of try and pull you back. And sometimes we get sucked back into it because we have such a need to belong, so we get sucked back into it, and then we go, God, no, this feels uncomfortable still, I don't want to be here. And then we go back into that state again. And then as we work through those core belief systems, and this is so much of the work that we both do, Marion, of really looking at our stories and our pain and what needs to be healed. As we do that work, my mum talks about, we move into the third level of consciousness, which is this symbolic way of being, where we actually can look back and have so much compassion and empathy for the tribe. We don't need to change them. We deeply accept them for who they are, and we know who we are, and we can meet them in whatever way we choose, knowing that you don't have to change, and you don't have to be, you can be who you need to be, and they don't have to change either. You can deeply love and accept them for who they are. And that I love that kind of different levels of awareness, because I see that so often. I've journeyed that so much in my own life, of stepping out of the tribe and then getting back in, and I care what people think, but I don't want to care what people think, and I want to be like this. And part of it is doing that work until we reach that knowing of, as we've said in many of our podcasts, we are enough. We are completely enough just the way we are. We don't need to be anything but who we are. And we're able to sit and stand in that place. And especially when we can parent from that place, that's incredible, because we're following our intuition, we're trusting our heart, we're being able to, we've healed a lot of those old stories, so that we're able to then come to parenting from a different way of thinking. But I think it's really important to understand that the people who we often think love us will sometimes pull us back into being the way they want us to be, because it's safe for them if we are like that. They know the role that you play. I play this role, you play that role. We all know what it is. Even if it's very dysfunctional, that's the role. And there's comfort in the dysfunction because we know it. And when you step out of that role into something else, that can feel deeply confronting for everybody and yourself. But the quest is to often go, well, who am I and who do I want to be?
I love that, Lael. I thinking similarly about conditioning, and I often say that conditioning is really important. It's how culture is passed down, and in a healthy culture, that's a wonderful thing. You know, if we live in a culture that's self-sustaining and that's healthy and that's gorgeous and beautiful, then you know, everyone learns, you know, oh, this is what's, you know, you look at any kind of intact culture that's really still connected to their indigeneity, like we see that beauty of that. And but if it's in a culture which I call the disconnected domination culture, that's what gets passed down. And I think it's really helpful to understand that culture is designed to be passed down. It's designed to be really strong. It's designed to be really strong. So the fact that we often will find it hard as we're moving away from that to more and more be connecting with who we really are, rather than who we've been mirrored to be or told we are or needed to become in order to fit in or be loved or belong. That it's normal and natural to find that process a big stretch. I mean, I'm thinking even about Bruce Lipton's work and about the different states of consciousness that we're in when we're younger. We really are almost like a highly hypnotizable state. We're taking it all in. We are learning exactly what is required in our family of origin and our culture. I mean, it's so powerful, which is why childhood is so important, which is why, you know, the parenting that we do and what we, you know, what our kids see and experience is so powerful, because we are literally in those different states of consciousness. So I think that's what I love about really reminding us that conditioning is designed to be really powerful, because it's the way cultures what's the word, they recreate themselves, they continue. But in a culture like us, where we really need to evolve and we need to actually shift into different states of consciousness, and which are much more related to connectedness and compassion and power, it's inevitably going to be really hard at times.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that, because I was thinking that too. There is some beautiful richness and gorgeousness that is passed down that becomes part of who we are, whether that's, I don't know, the love of cooking together, whether it's where you all sing, whether it's, I don't know, just there's so much beauty that can be passed down. Absolutely. And that is rich and magnificent. And I think the more painful elements, we often just kind of go, oh, that's just how it is, and we'll just get over it. But I think it's really important to know that we actually can do the work to shift and change that, because like we talk about, or I talk about with imprints or that conditioning, unless we actually stop to do the work, we will often just unconsciously pass it on to our children. And I know that so many people don't want to. I don't want to pass that on of the way that I felt. And that's where we kind of draw the line to say, okay, well, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to look at what doesn't serve me, look at what role I've played, look at how that makes me feel, and what can I do to shift that. So I would love to, because I really want to give our listeners perhaps some insights or tools that they can work with. If I was coming to you, Marion, and I was like, oh my God, I hate the way I am in my family. You know, everybody always makes me wrong. It's always my fault. Nobody takes responsibility. I don't like being there. You know, I turn into just a real, you know, I don't say what I really want to say. What would you say to me, Marion? What would you say is my first step to help?
Well, I would probably go down some kind of road, which is, what does this remind you of? Or how old do you feel? Or what do you really want to say? But basically, I always think for me, first of all, is empathy, to be really heard, to actually have your experience really heard. You know, I really hear how frustrated you feel, or how powerless you feel, or how scared you feel, or whatever it is, and to really, really deeply acknowledge that, because to me that's generally the first step. Love is the first step, really listening to actually what you did experience. And to me, I often think that in order for change to happen, we really want to change, but often what we did experience and how we did feel needs to be loved first in order to support us to move into willingness to actually change and to be different. And I think most attempts to change, if we don't get heard to some degree, if we don't actually get those feelings expressed, which again is why we're so passionate about aware parenting. I mean, I know there are so many modalities, and so, you know, I trust whatever anyone feels called to, but for me personally, I think hearing the feelings is vital, and what we actually experienced as little people growing up in that family.
I just can't agree with you enough, because I think we can know it in our heads. We can go, oh yeah, I was made to be this because of that, right? And my parents had a hard time, and then they passed on to me, and we can know it intellectually. But if we don't acknowledge it and feel it and give that younger parts of us a voice and hear them and love them, as you say, then we're just intellectualizing it all. We're just letting it understand in our head. And then so often we'll go back into that same situation and boom, we'll be triggered again because it's sitting in our bodies. And so I absolutely agree with you. We have to feel it first. Now, maybe that might be that you can journal it. Maybe for some people, they can journal, this part of me when I was 4, why did I have to be the scapegoat in the family? Why did everyone make me wrong? And be able to really express that and then be met with love and compassion. It could be that you bring it to your partner and say, can you listen to me around this? It could be that you take it to a therapist or someone who, is there to hold space for you to work through it. But I absolutely agree with you. The first piece is being able to feel the pain of what you took on board, or where what needs were not met for you in that dynamic.
And I love what you said, Lael, in terms of when we go back, if we just have the thoughts and the understanding, like, oh, this is how I was, or this is how I was treated, or I did it because of this. Because again of the wisdom of the psyche, if we go back into our family, the feelings, that the two reasons they show up, those feelings, one is the conditioning, this is how it is, but the other reason, I believe, is because those feelings want to be heard, which is why they keep showing up. And we can keep going, but I don't want to feel this way. But if we don't ever have those younger parts heard, I always have the sense that they're going, oh, are you going to listen to me this time? Oh, you're going to listen to me this time? Oh, wow, look. Oh, they're going back to see their family. You're going back to see your family. Oh, will you listen to me this time? It literally is like a little child going, please listen. I just want to be heard. And if we keep going, no, I don't want to, or I shouldn't, all the conditioning around the self-judgment or the shouldingness or all of that stuff that we can then add on the top, rather than just, oh, I hear you. I really hear these little parts of me, or having someone else to hear how we felt. Because
yes,
to feel a feeling, a painful feeling, and to be on our own with it as a little person, and it's so painful and so enjoyable, and we can't really feel it if we don't have an adult being with us, being able to be with it. So we still keep trying. We keep those little parts keep trying, and they will keep trying forever.
They will.
Will you hear me now?
Yes. And if you're wondering how that turns up as anxiety. That turns up as you sitting there on a Tuesday thinking, oh my God, on Saturday we're going to my family's for a barbecue. Oh God, what am I starting to feel sick all of a sudden, right? That's what's knocking at your door, is those little parts of you going, hey, we're here. I love it as you're saying it. We're here. We've got something to tell you. And and I'm going to just re-emphasize this because I love it so much. None of it is wrong. And none of it means that there's something wrong with you. We all have this. We all have these parts of ourselves that turn up when we feel scared that we're going back into a similar situation, or when something's reminding us of something. Like it's part of being human. And the more we can lean towards it and welcome it and thank it and sit down with it and listen, the sooner it passes. It actually becomes such a beautiful skill that we learn to develop, to not abandon those parts of ourselves, but welcome them and say, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing me which parts of me still feel hurt. Thank you for guiding me to know how to heal this so I can do it differently and I can move forward and grow. It's a gift. It is a gift. It's here saying, I'm here for you. I'm here for you. Come, just lean in. Come and listen. It's so powerful, isn't it? So powerful. And to reassure everybody, like this happened to me last week. I was literally massive meltdown, triggered by something. Like really, I haven't been in that state of like feeling for such a long time. And I had to call a friend to say, can you listen to me? Because I could feel there was like terror in my body. And I knew my brain was like, you're fine, Lael, you're fine. But I'm like, no, I'm really not fine. There's something big here. And I was surprised at myself because I hadn't felt like that in a long time. And I've done a lot of work, but it really reminded me, it's just another layer. This is just, we all have these. And so lean in. And I knew that I just needed someone to support me through it. And I did. And it moved pretty quickly. But it reminded me again of none of it is wrong. It was just saying to me, hey, you need to let go of this bit because it doesn't serve you anymore and it's still sitting there. So let's lean in.
So lovely, isn't it, to have that love. And I often think as well, other steps that can be after that are really supporting again those younger parts. So often we might find that we're going in these younger places in ourselves to often maybe try and get empathy. So for example, most people or many people into aware parenting, they'll be like, okay, now I get it. Listening to feelings, acknowledgement of feelings, this is really important. Then we might go back to our family of origin and go, no one's ever given me empathy. No one listens to feelings. Because of course, in what I call the DDC, listening to feelings is not a thing that generally happens. It's very rare. So it's very common that then we might keep going back and wanting to be heard. We might keep going, and every time maybe you go back and visit your family and you want them to hear you this time, and perhaps you're one parent just talks over you, or another one says, oh no, don't worry, it's all right, or you shouldn't worry, or what, that happened to me last Friday. So all these ways in our culture that we distract or we diminish or we talk over or we judge, these are all ways that are part of this conditioning. We may find that we're re-putting ourselves in those painful positions again because we're actually searching for empathy or whatever else it might be. It might be validation or acknowledgement, appreciation, whatever the particular hurt is. But we're asking for it in a place where they're not able to give it because they've never received it and they don't understand, and they don't, it's not that they don't love you, just often that they just have not experienced that. So I find another stage of the journey can often be really, I think there can often be a mourning process. I think I've shared about this in another podcast, and I remember going through that myself of like, it's possible that I might never ever receive that from this person, that of course I most want to receive it from them, and I might not ever get that from them.
Yes.
There's something about that process of really acknowledging that, and then being unwilling to actually keep searching for those places where we just get hurt over and over and over again, and to actually then go to places where we can. So again, that might be our empathy buddy or our partner if they're really competent empathy, or an aware parenting instructor, therapist, whoever it is, to actually start to get that experience of having our feelings heard, of receiving empathy, of being unconditionally loved, and to be unwilling to keep going back into that, the repetitive, I can't say the word, repetitive experience of not having that. And the paradox is that often that supports change to happen. So, in terms of my Marion method work, is when we actually receive that internally, and increasingly that new internal relationship is formed where we the younger parts know, I receive empathy, I'm heard, my feelings are welcomed. It actually can support change happen in the family system in such surprising ways. I've had that so many times with mentees where they go through that process and then actually something shifts in one or both of their parents, and in ways that you just could not even possibly believe. So I think that can be another important part of this journey.
I love that so much, because the way I often talk about it in my work is that, and I talk about it in the sense of an imprint. If we grow up with an imprint that says, I'm not heard, I'm not listened to, what I've got to say isn't valuable, we often keep looking for evidence that is true. So we keep putting ourselves in a situation where that same thing's going to be bounced back to us again and again. And we go, see, more evidence. No one listens to me. I'm not heard. What I've got to say isn't important. So we keep looking for it. And until we do that inner work, as you're talking about so beautifully, and look and shift and change, actually, I'm worthy of being listened to, and I have really important things to say, and I'm so willing for that to happen in my world, we start to look for evidence of that, right? And then we start to see it, and then that becomes what we're willing to shift and change in the way we do life. We are open to actually being loved and heard and listened to, because it starts internally. It's that whole thing. How can anyone love us so deeply if we don't start with ourselves? What if we're full of judgment and critical thoughts and, self-loathing, then that is the energy that we're putting out there of what we think we deserve or that we should have. And actually it always starts inside, doesn't it, to change that story and that pattern so that we actually can look for it. And I agree with you. I've had many people do powerful work like this, and then just shifts have happened in their family because they've moved from that internal place. It's pretty powerful, isn't it, of what can happen when we do that, and then what they're willing to have brought back into their lives.
So powerful, so
Mm.
powerful. And then I'm thinking of one other thing. I mean, there are many, there's hundreds that we could probably go down. The other thing, particularly going back to what you were talking about earlier on about all the ways that we might need to, or we might have developed in our family of origins to origin to survive or to belong or to be loved or to receive love. Is that there can often come a time where we actually really appreciate all those ways that we found, like the deep gratitude for finding a way within that system to get our needs met, at least somewhat. And even though we needed to kind of twist ourselves into pretzels or change ourselves, that we actually did all these amazing things. And it might also include feeling great gratitude for our control patterns, the ways we learned to suppress our feelings when we were in an environment which wasn't conducive, which wasn't able to listen, which didn't have the capacity to listen. So I find increasingly there comes that, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for that younger part of me and those ways that she found to actually get through this, rather than again having judgments of ourselves or trying to get rid of these parts of us. And again, the paradox is, and I find this always with love and compassion, and that the more we can actually really appreciate those parts and say thank you so much for all that you did, and I'm so grateful to you, actually again that supports change to happen. And I think, for me, the more we are trying to get rid of a part of us or a feeling, the more we're trying to disconnect from it, the more it goes. It's just like a little child again, it's like, no, but please, no, don't leave me. Whereas the more we just say, oh, thank you so much, and I love you, and I'm so grateful to you, the more those parts that needed to kind of cling on so hard to survive, they might go, oh gosh, well, maybe I'm not needed anymore because there's all this love here. So maybe I don't need to try and meet everyone's needs above my own, or maybe I don't need to be the scapegoat in the family, or maybe I don't need to save everyone, whatever it was. Those parts can increasingly go, oh, I can make a well-deserved holiday now because she's got this.
Yes. And I love too that as we integrate this internal stuff, it can allow us then to claim more space for ourselves, which may be about setting limits or boundaries with our family, whereas perhaps maybe we weren't able to, feel like we had a voice or we weren't listened to. As we integrate them internally, we can find we have more of that power, that internal power that actually says, you know what, I'm not willing for you to speak to me that way anymore. Or I'm actually not going to come over with the kids if that's how you're going to treat me. So here's my limit here, which once upon a time may have felt really scary. And you may have felt like I'll be judged or I'll be kicked out of the family. Or whereas it actually, as we do that inner work, it allows us to claim the space that we say, actually, that's a no for me. I'm not going to do that. Or yes, I'm willing to do this. Or it also can help us to then move into real compassion with family members who perhaps once we were judging or we were saying they are wrong. But as we do that internal work, as we have more and more compassion for ourselves, it allows us then to have more compassion for others. Now, it doesn't mean you should put yourself in situations where you still feel that it's really toxic or it doesn't feel good. Absolutely, sometimes the most empowering thing is actually to set a limit, say, I don't want to see you anymore. But it also can help us have compassion and understanding for where those people in our family have come from. And we can meet them where they're at, in the sense of we see that they don't have to change. Because as you said, when we're still searching, when we're going back going, oh, wow, I've just realized this bit, please hear me now, or please love me now, or please accept me now. When we're still looking for that, then, it often is a bit of a sign that we need to do more of that internal listening and work for ourselves. And when we have reached that place where we feel whole, or we feel healed in that, we actually are not looking for anything from them anymore, because we can just see that they are doing what they are doing. That's their best journey for who they are. And I actually don't need them to be any different, because they are doing who they are. And that is freedom. Like, that is so powerful, because you realize I actually don't need anybody to be a certain way in order for me to be okay, because you come to a place where you go, I'm okay the way I am. And I really feel the need to say this. If you are journeying this at the moment, you're listening to us and you are journeying this is big work. And as we say with kind of first generation aware parenting, it's big. You put up your hand to change massive patterns that have perhaps been there for generations. So it's really big work. So you've got to be so gentle, and you need support. And we're going to slip up at points, and then we're going to go, damn, I just lost my cool again, or I looked for it, but that's okay. I'll come back to myself again. I'll come back home. I come back home. I come back home. Each time as we do the more healing work, we then begin to grow and expand. But it's big stories that we're changing. And perhaps our parents, or even our siblings or our grandparents, perhaps they didn't have the tools, the insight, the courage, the strength to do that work. But if you are questioning it and you're here and you're nodding and you're like, yep, that sounds like me, then really, really want to acknowledge the courage and the strength it takes to be willing to change some of these stories for yourself and for your children.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And you know what I find as well is the further the journey goes, the more the viewpoint for me expands. So for me, earlier on in my journey, it was all about, me and my mum, me and my dad didn't do this. And I think that we so need to be there. We so need to feel all those feelings really intensely and really in that kind of micro level. And over the years, my experience is, am I keeping you up, Lael?
I just yawned. People will be listening to this and they're going, oh, no.
I'm sending you love. Are you a little bit tired?
I am a bit tired. Anyway, you're in the middle of something really beautiful.
So, see, in the past, like in the first year of our podcast, if you'd done that, I would have gone into some younger parts and like, oh no, she's fine. She is fine this boring. Whereas this time I didn't have that at all. I just thought it was funny.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go back.
Bigger picture is to go out more and more, to go. And again, I think this is important not to rush this, because I think we then can just bypass the feelings. It's really important when we're feeling all the feelings to feel them. Over time, as increasingly we welcome them and we express them and we've had them lovingly heard, I find that exactly as you say, that we get more and more compassion and understanding for our family of origin. And actually the way I see it is the picture keeps expanding. So for me, I see my parents, for example, so much affected by the time that they were born in, the time that they grew up in. And I have every faith that if I'd grown up in the same era that they had, I would have been very much more affected by all of that stuff. So I think to really understand, coming back to conditioning, that we are so much affected by the time and the culture that we are brought up in, and is changing really rapidly. And there are such big things going on the planet right now. And I think it's even more important than ever to really understand conditioning, because holy moly, I think it's unveiling itself really clearly right now, to actually understand these things have been going on not only for generations, but probably for thousands of years. And that actually, as we increasingly start to see that bigger and bigger picture, it becomes less and less personal in a way, less and less about, my mum did this or my dad did this, but actually to see this intergenerational waking up to the conditioning, so that we can increasingly become who we really are and be freed from so much of that painful stuff that exists in this culture, increasingly freed from judgment and guilt and shame and comparison and competition and lack and blah blah blah, all that stuff. And it's so possible, and it takes time and diligence and compassion, and but we are changing and shifting, I believe. And I want to thank all of our listeners for every single thing that you're doing, because what you're doing with your child, your children, and what you're doing in terms of your own development is so profound and is making a huge difference in terms of the consciousness on this planet, I believe.
Yes to all of that. And I mean, also it allows you to then live a life where you get to be who you want to be, right? I mean, that's the bonus of all of this work, is that you get closer and closer to having more joy and more intimacy and more love and more compassion and all the good stuff right? As we heal the parts that have felt really wounded and hard, we can often repeat them, so we keep having hard in our lives. And as we keep doing this beautiful, powerful work, we open ourselves up to feeling how we're meant to feel, which is we are meant to feel abundant and joyous and connected and passionate and full of love, all those kind of things. But a lot of that sometimes is hard to reach when we're carrying a whole lot of baggage around. So yeah, it's good to remember there's a lot of trade-offs for doing the work, that's for sure.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Good juicy topics. Have you got something you would love to offer people to think about around this?
I've got so many things to offer that I cannot think of one. I wonder if you were to close your eyes right now, like as I just did just then, and just to not just to connect in with yourself. How are you feeling right now? What are you thinking? What out of what we've said, what's jumping out at you as an invitation for what you might, not next steps you might take?
Oh, I like that. That's good. The next steps. And I think I'd like to offer just that, the invitation of more compassion for what we've had to do to get to where we are, compassion for the parts of you that have had to turn up in your family of origin that have been tricky, or perhaps it's been wonderful, or just can you bring the younger parts of you lots of compassion for what they've had to do to get to where you are. And as we always say, compassion is so powerful because it's what melts those tricky big walls that we build, and it's what helps ease the judgment, and it's what allows us to be more compassionate for other humans when we do it for ourselves. So I wonder if you can lean into some compassion for the younger parts of you that have had to do what they've needed to do to survive. Yes, so good.
Yum.
Have you got some offerings right now, Marion, that you want to share?
I'm doing the 2022 live run of my attachment play course, that's which I love, and running a 6-hour aware parenting online workshop in 2 parts. And that's for parents, but also people who want to become aware parenting instructors and who want that 6-hour workshop as part of their certification requirements. So yum about those two.
Nice.
What about you, lovely Lael? Apart from moving house and just a few small things like that.
I'm a bit on hold at the moment because I feel like I've been moving house for 3 months. It feels like that. Yes, I still have my couples course there. I'm planning something else that I'm going to do soon, but I think I need to move house first and get that sorted, and then I'll do the next. So for now, I'm just kind of pausing. We'll see. Yes. And I've had people message me about our book going, I thought your book was coming out. It is. Can we just tell you, this book has a life of its own, because every time we go to do something like it, something happens. So it's become a bit funny, hasn't it, Marion? We're just totally trusting that the perfect timing is going to happen for this book that's written, that it just keeps, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's waiting for the perfect time to launch. So we're just going to trust that, aren't we? It's coming. It's coming.
I will, and I'm reluctant to say it, but I do think it's coming really soon, because who knows? It will be here when it's here, and when it's closer, we'll be letting you know. I do think it's like birthing a baby, and I'm really into no, I don't believe in due dates. So
Me neither.
This is like really saying, well, we know it's coming, and when it's close, we'll be able to tell.
We're in the last trimester. We're totally in the last trimester, and we're getting uncomfortable. We're getting in that point where we're like, I always used to say to women, when I worked in birth for a long time, they're like, when do you think the baby would come? And I'd often have this theory of women would have to, they'd all be like, everything's ready, and they'd all be happy and joyous. And I'd be like, you got to get a bit grumpy first. That often women would have to get to the point where they're like, I'm so over this, or they start to go a bit internal, and I'm like, now we're getting ready, right? That's often when the babies would come, not when all the candles are lit and everything looks perfect. It's usually when they've all kind of died down and everything's a bit messy, and then it's like, here it is. So who knows? Maybe we've just moved through those bits.
I was going to say, Lael, I'm not inviting any more.
We don't need any more. We've had the messy
We've
bits.
had floods. We've had enough things. Thank you. I'm just ready for the ta-da.
Okay, we're ready now. Contractions are starting. They're on the way. Anyway, thank you everyone for being here again and for all your beautiful comments and shares. We so appreciate it. It's beautiful to see this being spread everywhere. Yeah, it's really, really touching.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So much love to all of you, and see you next time.